After what feels like whatever, I finally got my hands on an RTX 5080, and it's officially time to test how well the Blackwell architecture performs and if this is something that you should buy or something that you should look forward to upgrading to in the future. Now, sadly, I did not get my hands on a 5090 yet. I'm still on the hunt for one. I'm looking for one, just honestly any of the 5090s, to be honest. I got my hands on this 5080 Astral actually through the Newegg Shuffle. I signed up for it about 2 weeks ago, I guess, at this point, and they were just like, perfect, this is the card you get. And honestly, I just picked whatever I could. I wanted to get this content out for you guys, so I decided to pick up the 5080 Astral. I was selected to spend $1,800 on a graphics card so that I could review it for you guys. Selected to pay $1,800. Now I know Asus tax, all of that stuff, these cards are hard to get. I get the expensive price. But what I don't think you realize is that is the exact same amount that I spent on my RTX 4090 back in 2022. But I don't really want to get into the negatives yet of this card. I really do want to talk about just the design and the card itself. This card really is beautiful. I'm a big fan of the Astral design. It really took all of Asus's past highlights from their designs and it just made it into one card. It really does complement my X870E Strix motherboard. Kind of makes sense, they're from the same brand. And it actually is surprisingly like a millimeter or two longer than my 4090 Gaming OC, which was already a massive card, but I didn't have any troubles fitting this into my LANCool 216. Probably my favorite thing about this card actually is the fact that it has 2 HDMI ports on the back instead of the typical 3 display ports and an HDMI. It's 2025, a lot of people are running high-end TVs, OLEDs for example, that do like 120 hertz. You need those HDMI ports, as well as a lot of people, for example me, run HDMI 2.1 monitors. That's my OLED. There's less of an argument now. These have DisplayPort 2.1, which can allow full bandwidth, but my monitor doesn't support DisplayPort 2.1, so I do need HDMI still. On to how this thing performs. One thing too, before we get into the overclocking, I had no issues with noise or anything. I get that my Gigabyte Gaming OC is one of the louder 4090 models, but I never had any problems. This has an additional fan on the back, and it ran super duper cool. This thing is an overkill heatsink for it. At 400 watt power limit, this thing was going like 60 degrees max on the auto fan curve. Wasn't even that loud. Obviously though, we did have to max overclock this thing, and we did so, but not without any issues. I'd be lying to you guys if I didn't say this is the worst NVIDIA experience I've ever had, starting all the way back in 2017 with my 1050 Ti. The most comparable experience I had was my 6900 XT in 2021 to 2022, and we all know how I kind of feel about that card. To start, the voltage slider in MSI Afterburner doesn't even work. If you enable the allow and the adjustments, if you start changing stuff, it's just going to bug out on you, and it's actually going to cause the card to perform worse than stock. Black screen issues, I didn't personally have those, but the fact that you need a hotfix driver gives like AMD vibes. And just buggy drivers altogether. I had to roll back from the latest driver at the time when I got this card last week and literally go to the launch driver because that was the only one that was usable. But when I was actually able to overclock the card, it did perform very, very well, and I was very, very impressed. I was able to do plus 360 megahertz on the core, which is about 3250 megahertz in game, as well as maxing out the VRAM slider on the GDDR7 at plus 2000, giving full bandwidth, and it was actually scaling the entire time. So this is something that I'm not expecting just myself to do, or like it's a error correcting. No, this actually does help. For the first time ever, I will be omitting 1080p from my benchmarks. I fully believe that if you're buying one of these graphics cards, you should be running at least a high refresh rate 1440p monitor, if not a 4K OLED. That's really how you're going to take advantage of these cards, and especially with the use of frame generation or DLSS, there's more reasons than ever to ditch 1080p. And although the industry is relying on frame gen and all that stuff, upscaling, I will not be using that in any of my benchmarks. This will be raw, pure rendering. The rest of my system is my 9100X3D with a PBO overclock, 2x16 running at 6400 MHz CL32, 2133 FCOK on the Asus X870E Strix E. This is just the maxed out PC that I have. The whole point of this PC is to be as fast as possible and remove a CPU bottleneck as as an ever. The 4090 that I use for comparison is my 4090 gigabyte gaming OC that I got back in launch day. This thing does have an XOC BIOS on it that allows it to pull a little bit more power, but more importantly, it gives about 1-2% more performance in games. I'm running at 3 gigahertz plus 1000 on the memory. Fully stable. This is the settings I run every day. And just as a reminder, the 5080 is running at about 3250 megahertz in games, as well as plus 2000 on the memory. I've also included stock numbers to show how much an overclock on this card does help, which it truly does. Starting off with the synthetics, Time Spy Extreme, which is a 4K DirectX 12 benchmark. It's a bit old now, but it is still very, very relevant. Shows an 8.8% increase in graphics score by overclocking the 5080, which is really super impressive. 8% more performance just by overclocking. Spend an hour, you get 8% more performance. Perfect. But then you realize that the 4090 is 12.9% faster than the 5080. Doesn't look so great now for the 5080. Speedway shows more or less the same. This is a newer ray tracing benchmark, and this shows the same scaling with a stock versus overclocked 5080, but the 4090 is only 9.3% faster. This is most likely due to Blackwell's improvement in ray tracing. Shadow of the Hardware Nerd shows a blowout for the 4090 being on average about 15% faster than an overclocked 5080 in 4K, and 1440p shows a smaller difference with the 4090 only being 5% faster. This is mostly due to the GPU mattering less at lower resolutions and it being more CPU bound. Time for the esports titles now. Fortnite shows very close performance for both 1440p and 4K. This is mostly because this is DirectX 11 performance. This is supposed to be mostly CPU bound, and that is what it is. That's why everything is super close. Potentially, if I did a different map that had a little more effects or something on it, it could cause a difference, but I'm not expecting it at all. And when I was playing the game, actually just for fun, 4K 240 ran perfectly fine on both graphics cards. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 shows a tie for the 5080 and 4090, surprisingly in 4K, but a win for the 4090 in 1440p. I was super surprised about this, especially since this is not what I've seen really in any other game. Typically, if it's going to tie in 1440p, one might show a win in 4K, just because especially the 4090 does have more SMs, allowing raw power to be a little higher. Maybe NVIDIA did some secret Blackwell scaling to make it better in 4K Call of Duty, kind of like how AMD purposely kind of makes their graphics cards faster in Call of Duty. Yep, we all know they do it. Now onto the single player games though. These are going to be definitely focusing more on ray tracing and more on the experience and the higher settings and fidelity. Forza Horizon 5 shows a tie in average FPS at 4K, but a massive increase in lows for the 4090 being 8.5% faster. Now, if you're going to tell me that you can get the same average FPS, but one's going to have significantly better lows, you're always going to want to pick that. The lows are what matters. That's the smoothness. That's what you care about. 1440p actually does show a loss, though, for the 4090, with it being 13% slower, probably because of this thing can actually fit into the VRAM. The 5080 only has 16 gigabytes. The 4090 has 24, but this is just because of those ray tracing optimizations, kind of why like Speedway showed a narrower gap for the 5080 and the 4090. Cyberpunk 2077 in 4K did amazing on the 4090, with it being 20% faster than the 5080. 20% increase is massive, but when you're going from 40 to 48 FPS, that is actually like a smoothness that you can notice. At 1440p, the 4090 is 15% faster, which is also another massive increase. Something I wasn't expecting because of how Forza was with ray tracing showing its strengths on the 5080. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle shows another large improvement for the 4090. This is a game where you really do want that high fidelity because it does look amazing. 15% faster on average in 4K and around 8% faster in 1440p. What makes me angry though is that when I played through this game, I was able to run, not very well though, 4K Supreme full ray tracing, and it would load on the 4090. As soon as I switched to the Supreme preset on the 5080, it would crash because it ran out of VRAM. NVIDIA, you upped the 5090's VRAM to 32 gigabytes. This card has the perfect ability to be 24 gigabytes. Anyone who wants one, gamers, AI developers, this is a card that should have had 24 gigabytes. I'm sorry, but you missed the boat on this one. Maybe you'll have a 5080 Ti that makes sense. So, should you buy one of these? I think it honestly depends. With this price of being, I think, $1680 before tax, no. Don't buy this. look for something like a used 4090, wait for supply to go down. If you can get a retail unit for about 1,000 USD, I would actually recommend this card. I think it's a pretty decent and compelling argument at $1,000. If you're an AI developer and you need new AI optimizations and the VRAM doesn't matter, yeah, go ahead. If you're not really playing games where you're needing 24 gigabytes of VRAM or higher than 16, go ahead. If you really care about DisplayPort 2.1 and you want to make sure you're not running DSC, that's honestly a major selling point in my opinion over the 4090. Because I think for gamers though, the 4090 is going to be the better option. There's just fewer downsides in this card. It looks like 4090 buyers who were called dumb for spending $1,700 on a graphics card in 2022 are actually the smart ones, because now you're doing the same thing in 2025 but with a worse card. Let me know what you guys are rocking GPU wise. If you're gonna upgrade, which one you're gonna do. Are you waiting? Let me know in the comments down below what's your thoughts on the 5080 Astral and if you think it's worth it. I am personally returning this. I'll leave affiliate links down below to these graphics cards though, as well as the 9070 XT review coming soon. Yep, join the Discord if you haven't subscribed, hit the like button down below, comment, all that stuff. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.